before 11 o'clock. Not a bad-looking Thursday. Hope you're doing well. Got a good book to tell you about. Very inventive. This next book is very out of the box. Chip Jacobs is the author. Chip is an award-winning journalist, a contributor to the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, Weird Science. I think this book might fall into that category.
Cool.
CNN, Bloomberg. He's an electric guitarist, not to be confused with the non-electric guitarist.
Yeah, I just thought that was pretty neat.
Beatles and Led Zeppelin fan and Squeeze?
Yes.
Oh, a Squeeze maniac.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I gotta ask him what that means.
Gotta hang out with him.
Yeah, he's so
Sounds
cool,
fun.
dude.
His book is called, and do you know how to pronounce it? Arroyo?
I don't know if that's the proper way or not, but that's my guess.
Arroyo. Let me just read a little bit, and then we'll say hello. Arroyo is set against two distinct epochs in the history of Pasadena, California. In Arroyo, it's the parallel stories of a young inventor and his clairvoyant dog in 1913 and 1993. And in both lives, they are drawn to the landmark Colorado Street Bridge or Suicide Bridge. When I was a kid, I used to go sleigh riding on Suicide Hill, by the way.
Oh, my gosh. I think everybody had a Suicide Hill in their community.
Chip Jacobs, you've given us something to think about. Good morning. How are you?
Doing very well. How are you guys doing?
Good. Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from my little office in Pasadena, California, not far away from the bridge. That is the, subject of my story.
So this is fiction, but there's what? There's a connection to any real stories other than the bridge?
That's a great question. It's historical fiction, and almost everything you're reading about the city and the structure is true. I just took some imaginary characters, sort of based on myself and my own dog, and put them in a drama back in the progressive age of America, when this bridge was going up. And, it was a very quixotic time. The automobile age was beginning, but, the remnants of, the romance of that era were very much alive. And so, you mentioned being out of the box. I'm not letterboxed. Every time you look, you're coming into a corner.
How do you pronounce the title?
You pronounce it Arroyo.
Arroyo, okay.
Yeah.
I guess I had it right.
So, it's Spanish for dry wash. But by the time this bridge was being built, it was anything but dry. In fact, it was very thought-over real estate.
Oh, okay. And is that a part of this the story? I'm intrigued as to how it spans all those years.
Absolutely. I was very much affected by the movie Born on the 4th of July, where a gung-ho Marine turns into a dissident and activist against the country he so loves. And that's sort of, the arc of my character. And he, where he's once mesmerized by everything that is this Colorado Street Bridge, in his next life, in 1993, he's, indifferent and a little hostile towards it because he has a past with it.
So is his next life a reincarnation?
Yes, it is.
Ah, okay.
But he's not the same brilliant guy he was in the first life because he didn't accomplish what he was supposed to when he had his chance.
But is it?
I think it's sort of a morality, exploration. If we don't reach our highest destiny, we're coming back and, getting another shot. But, we may, not have the same,
right.
we may not draw the same cards.
Is the difference that he has a different view of protocol, like status quo, where sometimes we all want to be good and we all want to obey, but at the same time, we're not really sure that the thing we're obeying is the best thing for us, and then we become rebellious. Is that what happens to him in his second life?
That's an interesting interpretation. I think it's more that he needs to speak. People say speak truth to power, and in this case, he needs to speak truth to concrete. And he knows that the bridge that we do kind of worship out here and is gorgeous and is a milestone in engineering, was built with a lot of lesser agendas and some secrets. And his job is to sort of out them.
And you speak about the pay because way back then, I mean, there were no safety nets. There weren't anything. These guys were like renegades up there.
That's funny you say that because there weren't any safety nets, but both working on the bridge, up, think about it, up 15, 16 stories in the air, and there was absolutely no safety nets in terms of pensions, industrial protection, severance pay, those types of things. I mean, it was much more of an unofficial deal. And one of the things I learned in my research is that there's a deadly construction accident that happens before the bridge opens. And when you look to see the news coverage in the aftermath, there's almost nothing about the men that were wounded or almost died. And there's almost everything about when is this bridge going to open so we can have our glorious celebration. And to be honest with you, that really incensed me as a human being. And I'm still hoping Pasadena will pay tribute to these people that gave the ultimate sacrifice,
Oh, that's interesting. So the bridge itself appears in other writings, correct?
You mean by me or
no, by like authors in the past? Now, I don't mean as the subject matter, just as referencing the bridge.
Absolutely. This bridge is like, it might be the most busy working female in Hollywood. I mean, it's in continual car commercials. It's in literature. Other writers refer to it, including Michael Connelly. In fact, a couple of years ago, I saw a cover that was one of his books. And he's a former LA Times reporter. And the bridge was featured on the cover. And I started having, getting drenched in sweat, thinking, oh my God, I've waited too long. This guy is writing about the bridge. Fortunately, it wasn't the subject of the bridge, but it's so beautiful. Everybody wants to grab it for their, narrative or for their art.
Yeah, sure. I'm guessing it appears on a lot of T-shirts.
I don't know, man, it's it seems like every other day there's a true crime bus waiting to bring people out, show them the bridge, talk about despair, and it is considered somewhat of a nexus for ghost and paranormal activity. I don't really touch on that in the book because it feels a little cliche, and I wanted to write something different.
Yeah.
You talk about the Purple Mother.
I do. Catherine Tingley. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was something. Back at the turn of the century, even though all technology was beginning to really infiltrate the American culture, there was still very much belief in seances, tarot cards, psychics, and all these things. And yet, they were being driven out of the city by the establishment that looked at them as, kind of lowbrow and rip-offs and unbecoming of a proper metropolis. But yeah, I'm very interested in her.
We haven't talked about the clairvoyant dog yet. Tell me about the clairvoyant dog.
Well, if in many books, the dogs are sweet and brilliant and, kind of dumb and subservient. I wanted my dog to be a little bit of a genius, a little bit of a horn dog, a little bit of, a troublemaker. And, he needed to be able to get inside his companion's head because his companion believed he knew what his destiny was. And so in the first book, the dog actually kind of wants to be human and he approximates, my anti-hero's, traits. But he's also in there telling them, dude, you better wake up. This bridge is not all that it seems. And of course, my character doesn't listen. And so I thought, it would be fun to have a dog, that had higher powers, even though he's, going around and sniffing the bushes and, looking for poodles.
Looking for poodles.
You talk about the history of...
poodles, I should say.
You speak about Nathaniel.
I'm sorry?
You speak about the character of Nathaniel. Being a mechanical whiz.
Oh, that's...
And Jules, yeah.
Right. Nick's father was that, named that. And then Nick was, sort of the more ebullient son. And, I tried to create characters that had somewhat tragic backgrounds. Mm-hmm. Jules had a tragic background. My lead character did. But I wanted them to come together in, with chemistry and also, a little bit of a darkness they're trying to bring light into. And, I think we're very much scarred by early trauma, and I think that does drive us throughout our lives.
I think so, too. It was most excellently written, I thought.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, this is my first, I was trained as a journalist, newspaper reporter. I loved English. This is my first stab at fiction, and it's a little terrifying, I must tell you. And it took me many drafts, about 1,000 curse words, and about 7 or 8 printer cartridges to get it right.
You've answered a question I was going to ask regarding just how the transition was from journalist to novelist, and did part of the challenge incorporate the tendency to want to write in a journalistic way?
Because that's a fascinating point. I have written other books before, and I always try to bring that new journalism, creative spin to it. And so you're not just following that typical journalese, the inverted pyramid of what, when, where, and why. But fiction was far more challenging. Because you can have characters doing anything. You can bring in sex, you can bring in violence, you can use curse words. The freedom is sometimes strangled.
Yeah. It's like cable radio for us. Yeah.
Exactly. I had to read a lot. I had to go back to people I thought were the masters. Many of them former journalists like Pete Dexter, who is one of the greatest writers around. Read historical fiction. See how they worked in, very well-known personalities, but didn't make them take over the plot.
And are you fluent in the Spanish culture and the Spanish language?
Oh, heck no. I've forgotten about 95% of all the Spanish I took in high school. But, that's something that I had to... it was like taking a general education of 1913. And so you had to learn about Spanish culture. I had to learn about bridge engineering. I had to learn about Upton Sinclair. I had to learn about Teddy Roosevelt, who plays a very big role in this book. And I have to say, I have a massive man crush on Teddy Roosevelt.
And you do bring up the New Deal in here also. I just love this.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I just thought history was fascinating, and I never knew that you could play around with it as a writer. So I'm getting to fuse two of my favorite things. Teddy Roosevelt. We wouldn't have, if Teddy Roosevelt hadn't run again for president as an independent, we wouldn't have had Woodrow Wilson in there. So think about all the things Woodrow Wilson introduced. But everything is so interconnected, and that is one point I try to make in the book. By him coming back to life and seeing one person that he's seen before, I do think that we're all this spider web vibrating on each other's, web.
A part of what you're saying right now tells me that when a journalist becomes a novelist, you also bring to the table a really really complete understanding of history. I think most journalists, especially if you're going to write political stuff, you need to not only know what's going on with Donald Trump, but you need to know what went on with other presidents in the past. Am I onto something here? Is that part of
for sure
how this book came to be?
For sure, and you not only need to know history, how politics have evolved, but I also think you need to marshal and honor and write about people you've met. And I've met so many interesting people through my reporting, and oftentimes they were bigger characters than the people they were trying to expose. And so I tapped into a lot of those people. Almost every character in the book is based on somebody I met. And I'm just taking their outline and filling in the details in an exaggerated way. So that was one of the greatest things about being a journalist. You never knew who you were going to meet that day. Sometimes they wanted to strangle you, but other times they would talk.
What's interesting, if you watch let's say a series on TV or something that's got an ongoing story, almost like a soap opera, right, and you miss a few pieces. Sometimes it doesn't matter, but it's always better when you know the past. And it's interesting how in the past of your character, it's another physical lifetime. It's a very interesting way that you've taken a story and given us a history that isn't completely or in the truest sense, because usually our history only goes back as far as our birth.
That's true. Being the neurotic OCD personality that I am, I could seriously edit and work and polish this book until the end of time. I had this tension between wanting to add more sensory description of the era, what things looked like and smelled and felt like when you touched them, but I also came against the strain of trying to tell the history of Pasadena, a slightly alternative history. Pasadena, because of the Rose Parade and culture and attractions and the sun, it gets this enormous self-perpetuating amount of publicity, right? Think of all the people in the East Coast waking up with massive hangovers on January 1st, and they're turning on the TV and they're seeing the Rose Parade, right?
Exactly.
I wanted to really create some, questions about what is history. Is it what we tell ourselves, or is it what really happened? As this glorious bridge, spans the valley, it also contains a lot of blood and a lot of pain for families. And at its inception, I don't like that it's actually called Suicide Bridge. I'm trying to retake the name back to Colorado Street Bridge, just like you two took back Helter Skelter from Charles Manson.
I love the part in the book where they say you never get a second chance to make a first impression about the solar lamps and William Thune.
Right. I know. Well, but if you believe in reincarnation like me, you're always getting another chance to make a good first impression.
Exactly.
It may not be easy. One of the things in my first drafts, I had much more magical realism, and over time I realized that was an error, and I was relying too much on that to turn the levers of my story and cut it back. But I have to tell you, there was a book that came out of about Florida called Swamplandia, right? Mm-hmm. And it was a fantastic, fantastic book. Won a ton of awards. And, there's an effortlessness in writers that know how to use just the right amount of magic, but a bigger dose of reality. So I'm always learning and always trying to find other great writers, that I can, understand their tricks.
Your question about history is illustrated probably in all of us when we look back, if we're old enough, and both Robin and I are. if you look back in earlier times in your life, you look at it with fondness, and you forget that you were nervous about the mortgage payment. You forget that you had a relative that was deathly ill and then died. You forget all the bad stuff, and you only remember, it's very selective. And because that's the way we are as humans, I think it's ingenious that this guy has a different life to go back to, or to look back. It almost would be like I look at a box of pictures with my grandfather's generation, and I'm feeling that same pang of reminiscence that I would if it was my own life.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because in the second life of my character, which is only a very small part of the book, right? Can you imagine looking at an invention that you created in the past life, but because you're so feckless and rudderless, you can't appreciate this came from your soul and your own imagination. And so I do wake up my character in a second life in all places in Banana Republic, which is as far away from 1913 romance of, handcrafted goods and parasols and ostrich riding that you can get. I wanted to have a mediation asking who we really are, and maybe inside of us we do know who we are, but we're just not challenged.
But Arroyo, I almost cried during some of those chapters with him when he was being taken away and stolen, and Nick was looking for him.
I know. I have forever had a connection to dogs, and some of the scariest, worst moments in my life is when my dog got out of the yard or my dog escaped. And it's like, I felt like my whole being was being rattled, and I did lose a dog when I was 18. He got hit by a car. And that has really affected me my whole life, and I tapped into that pain. I do realize the best writing comes from pain, and So, I think dogs speak to our better selves, and I needed to have that dog, escape.
Yeah, because he's so dogs are and children, they're so innocent, and I can't stand it when people hurt them.
That's true. I mean, I feel like animals and little children still have kind of the stardust on heaven on them, and as we get older, we just become more cynical.
Mm-hmm.
There's less surprises in life.
Right.
And what would happen if you had a dog that actually could tap into your head, right, and try to give you advice on where you're supposed to go?
Man.
We think we know our destinies, but do we really?
See, if my dog could do that, it would totally ruin. I used to pretend I was David Copperfield, the magician, because I could throw a cookie. I could throw a cookie across the room, and it would disappear, and she would be looking for it for a long time, and it never actually left my hand. And she thought, this guy's a magician.
You better be careful, because that dog could come back and be haunting you. But, I did do some research on dogs, for this book, and one thing I learned is that dogs actually watch the light in your eyes, and that's how they sort of gauge your mood, your spirit, whether they're going to get a walk, maybe a pork chop or whatever, And I found my dog actually during the writing of this was watching my eyes, and I can be a distracted personality, and sometimes I felt like the dog was staring over at me and going, "Get off the internet and get back to the freaking."
Oh, that's good stuff.
And I love the fashion that you've incorporated in your book. I mean, from spats to the ladies' clothing. I thought that was really, really wonderful. You set that all up.
Thanks. I do wish I would have written more about that, gotten more into the women's fashion, gotten what the trousers look like, and the different names of hats and things. And I tell you, when I look at the news today, I wish there was a way I could time warp myself back into 1913 and just have an ice cream cone, ride an ostrich, and get in trouble.
That's the journalist in you wanting to do that. But the editor that you have to work with is probably thinking, "No, don't go there." I don't.
But you also have humor in there about remembering about putting a toad in a freshly baked apple pie. I mean, you have a lot of fun things too to laugh about.
I do. I mean, when you write a book, you're asking people to give up the most precious thing they have. Money. No. Time. You're asking people to give up 7 or 8 hours of their life. And if you're not making them laugh, or entertain them, what's the point? And I'm just a hopelessly sarcastic person. And, I just had to bring in outrageous stuff in there and try to have, laughter, suffused inside the, more serious elements.
So tomorrow in the news there'll be a story about a man in Florida has baked a frog into a pie, and now the experts are blaming Chip Jacobs, the author of Arroyo, for doing this.
That's right.
I do not recall.
What a fun interview. Thank you so much for being on the air with us. The book is outstanding. You're definitely not a new writer, even though it says you're a debut novelist, but this is really a well-done book. I have a copy of it. I'd like to give it away to a listener, so call me at 622-9622, and I will leave it here for you. The rest of us can buy it on Amazon, let's see, what do I want to do? Oh, it's 2 days old. It's a brand new book. And do you have a website, Chip, that you can direct us to?
I do. It's very hard to remember. It's called chipjacobs.com.
chipjacobs.com. Chip, thank you so much. What a fun interview. You are definitely welcome back anytime.
Thank you. I had an absolute blast. God bless you guys.
We'll be right back. Rep Today, a one-day reptile event in Gainesville, October 26th, is at the Wyndham Garden at 2900 Southwest 13th Street. Call 863-268-4273 or go to www.repticon.com for more information and to purchase tickets. It may not be Jurassic Park, but you'll encounter live animals and see thousands of reptiles and other exotic animals. Again, that's October 26th at Wyndham Garden in Gainesville, because kids of all ages love reptiles. Rep Today.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News, I'm Chris Foster. Ambassador to the European Union Gordon Sondland is telling House committees looking into impeachment that President